some stuff. So, number one, we're going to be working on this for quite some time, all right? So, final essay date and all that kind of stuff, I'm not entirely sure yet, like when your final paper is going to be due, when you'll do ultimate submission and all that kind of stuff. Today is February the 14th. Honestly, the closest that you probably would get to submitting a due date for this would be somewhere probably around March the 14th or whatever. So it's probably about a month away. That does not mean that you're writing a 20-page research paper. You're not. It doesn't mean that you're going to be using all 50 note cards into your paper, because you're not. It just simply means that there's a lot of steps that we got to go through in order before you finally are completely done with your paper. What will happen with the paper, we'll do something similar with Google Docs like we did before with Metamorphosis essay, with Oedipus Rex essay, where I kind of give you some guidelines for each paragraph. I will let you know that those guidelines aren't going to be quite as detailed this time, simply because Zach could be writing about a completely different topic than what Logan would be writing about, and then completely different from what Lexi could be writing about. So the same guidelines might not necessarily work for everyone. The structure will be pretty similar, and the point value certainly is going to be the same, but I might not be able to give you quite as much like guidance on all the parts. What you are going to do, though, looking up here at the top where it says assignment, within the storyline of the dystopic novel Fahrenheit 451 are connections to a wide variety of topics. For this assignment, you're going to select one of the topics listed below, and they're not listed below because we're going to kind of like brainstorm what the topics would be, and you'll be able to write that on the back. To brainstorm and research. So ideally, and I realize it's ideally, that it's not a guarantee, that you might end up researching a topic that is hopefully going to be of some interest to you. Your research is going to culminate in a persuasive research paper that discusses both Fahrenheit 451 links and the information that you've learned. What I mean by persuasive research paper is, yes, there's obviously going to be a research component, you're doing 50 note cards and all that kind of stuff. But for it being persuasive, you're not just informing us, reader, about your topic. You're going to take a stance on the specific topic and explain why this is a good thing, why there should be some kind of changes or whatever the case may be. Yeah. So the hope is by the end of this week, today being Wednesday, the hope would be by Friday, roughly, you got a pretty good idea of what your topic is going to be. And then you kind of start thinking about what some of those subtopics are going to be that you're going to look at it. Now, I realize people start kind of asking about, how many points is this going to be and all that kind of stuff. Some highlights so far as what points will be. Your 50 note cards that you're going to do, and we'll talk about that. 50 note cards are going to be worth how many points? 50 points. There you go.
They should be worth 100.
That's not going to be good. When you turn in your final research paper itself, rather than 100 points, this one's going to be 150 points. So the rubric's a little bit different, so you'll see how that's going. So between those two things right there, you can certainly tell that, all right, our point value is jumping up because you're taking a look at 200 points. There are going to be some smaller things along the way. Preliminary bibliography that you're going to give to me is going to be worth 10. We'll do some points for your drafts with your paragraph, as we do. Your draft of your essay is going to probably end up being in that 30-point range, so to speak. And there could be some other things that are going to kind of happen along the way. So when it's all said and done, not that it's a 300-point single assignment that you're going to be turning in, but we're probably going to be looking in the ballpark of about 250 to 300 points along the process. So it's not one large, big grade that's going to go in. Hey, good. But it's not going to be something where, all right, next Friday, turn in your 300-point essay. You have, now go. We're going to be doing little things along the way where those points are going to be accumulating. And honestly, the whole idea really would be, even if the essay has a couple, weaknesses along the way, you take care of business with the other stuff, those things certainly kind of balance out.
So what's 200 points?
Well, so if the two main parts of the assignment that folks usually focus on are the note cards, as clearly people were going, oh my goodness, and then the final paper itself being the 150. So it's just simply those two together give you the grand total of 200. But there'll be some other points that are going to kind of be taking place along the way. Just so, again, kind of show you from a timeline standpoint what's going to be happening. I know might not see this quite as clearly as you want. The hope for this week is by Friday, you kind of know what your topic is going to be. What are you doing for school on Monday? Absolutely nothing, because you're not going to be here. So you have President's Day off on Monday. Now, look at that. 50 note cards doesn't sound so bad all of a sudden. On the 20th through the 23rd, what we're going to start doing, and we're going to be in class for this, is we're going to start doing what's called our preliminary bibliography. Preliminary bibliography literally means you start looking for sources. They're not necessarily sources that are going to make it into your essay, but we're just going to start looking for general sources. So I'm going to show you things with laptops in here. We're going to go through different databases. We're going to make a list of sources within Noodlebib. And we've certainly logged into Noodlebib already this year. But we're going to kind of start figuring out some general sources that you could be using for your note cards. The 26th, which is going to be a Monday, we'll go over note-taking a little bit, just to remind you how to properly fill out a note card. Then, starting on the 27th, we're going to be in the library. So we're going to be in the library on the 27th, the 28th, March 1st, March 2nd, and then we're also going to be in the library the following week for a day or two. So So we'd also be in there on March 5th. So you're going to be in the library for a minimum, actually we'll go on the 6th too. We're going to be in the library for a minimum of 6 days. So Luke, Adam, some others have this whole idea of, oh my God, 50 note cards stuck in your head. You're going to be in the library for 6 days where the sole task is to fill out note cards. Filling out 10 note cards in one class period is a pretty reasonable, doable goal. I always give us at least 6 days because the first day takes a little while just to kind of figure out which sources do I want to start to take a look at or whatnot. But we'll do preliminary checks then for your note cards every couple days. So after like 3 days, I'll do a check where you should be at 20 note cards. After a few more days, do a check that you should be at 40. And then when it's all said and done, you should be done with 50. But just because you have 50 note cards doesn't mean 50 sources, 50 quotes, anything like that are going to be making it into your paper right away. Your paper is about an issue within Fahrenheit 451. You are not writing an analytical essay about the book, though, throughout. The book will be part of your essay, but it is not going to be the main concept that you're trying to write about. So if we go back to your to that little chart or the page that you picked up today that has like different requirements for it. Your final paper, you're going to write 6 paragraphs. Normally, we've been doing 5. There's one more paragraph. I'm going to show you today what the structure is going to be. If we don't get it today, I'll show you tomorrow. So you know exactly what's going to be going on in each paragraph. All right? It doesn't mean that you have like 4 big body paragraphs with all these quotes coming from the book. For your final essay, you have to have at least 5 sources making it into your essay. One of those sources is going to be Fahrenheit 451, and then you have to have at least 4 other sources coming in. Of those 4 sources, one has to be a book, and then you can use some other things. We're going to certainly focus on using databases through the library. If there's like a website that you want to use, you come up with your own website. As long as you show it to me, I give you the thumbs up, you can use that website as well. When you do your preliminary bibliography, everyone's going to have at least 10 sources to start with, and then you can whittle that list down to getting to the 5 that ultimately you want to use. If someone wants to use 6 or 7 sources, that's fine, but the minimum requirement would be at 5. Adam, I feel like you might have misread this one part. I want to say that you said minimum 15 note cards for any source. when you were looking over it, it's maximum of 15 note cards. So all that means is you can't find one source and take 45 note cards from it, because then you're really just using that source as your thing. I think most people, you're probably going to be more in the range, more likely of like 7, 8, maybe 9 note cards per source, but you can't have one go up any more than 15. So if you find 7 sources, you don't have to take 7 times 15 and now all of a sudden giving me 105 note cards. That's not what we're going to do. Okay? And the other like general, I know we haven't talked about topics and like structure of what the paragraphs are, but any like other general questions at this point. No one has gotten out their paper bag and paper ventilator.
I'm done with this. I quit.
No, you don't.
Speaking Spanish.
All right, I'd flip your page over. Topics. What is it that we can write about? As I said, you're not writing about Fahrenheit 451 in the sense of giving us like a rundown summary of all the events that happened in the book. What I want you to do is identify at least some kind of issue. That okay? I want you to identify some kind of issue that shows up in the book, and then be able to write about it. And not how that issue just is in the book, but you write about like how that issue could be significant in like 2018. So here again, you're not just solely writing about book, but you're taking a stance, you're arguing about some kind of point. So something kind of general that would show up. What is the main thing that is getting taken away in Fahrenheit 451? People don't have books. Now, you're not going to write an essay, at least I don't think you're going to write an essay about why you should not burn books or why you should burn books. But what's kind of being taken away from folks? They don't have access to knowledge or information. There's a word that we use for that when a government or a group of people limit what you have access to. It's called censorship. Some places are in the news for South Korea.
Pyongyang.
So you have censorship, okay? You could, and you can keep it as general as this, where you take a look at an issue such as censorship as a topic that you would want to address. If this is going to be persuasive, so you could end up writing about why governments should not censor any kind of information. You could take a look at why you think it is important that governments censor certain information, or at least keep tabs on things. Where if Mr. Kane goes to a library and is checking out a lot of books on how to make a bomb, it's pretty important that we know that and therefore are able to keep an eye on him and whatnot. So you can kind of take this in a lot of different directions. When it comes to censorship, there's, certainly you could just be taking a look at books in general. In a lot of ways, music is something that comes under fire, where should it be censored or should it not? And then also things such as TV, movies, things of that nature. If you liked one of those things in particular, you could write a whole essay about censorship within the music industry. If you didn't want to focus on one of those, but you wanted to write about the whole idea of books, music, and TV, what have you now created? Subtopics that you could kind of focus on with paragraphs. You ultimately have to pick a side. One of the paragraphs, and I think we'll start going over the structure today, one of the paragraphs that you'll look at is going to be like a counter argument. So you can, like, let's say you're against censorship in general, but you can kind of see why it might be necessary to censor something within like an elementary school library. Little kids shouldn't be reading certain content or whatnot. You can acknowledge that it should go to a certain extent. You can certainly acknowledge that there are exceptions to things, but everyone's going to acknowledge the counter argument where you go, this is an opposing viewpoint, but ultimately this is why my side's better than the other. So you're going to be consistent with your argument, but if you pick something where you think there would be some exceptions to it, that's okay. And you just let us know what those exceptions are. You take and this isn't an issue that would be showing up within Fahrenheit, but you take something like abortion. If a person is against abortion, you might have some instances though where they'll go, I'm against abortion. However, if going through labor puts the mom's health at risk, or if the person became pregnant due to a rape, those might be exceptions to which they would be willing for an abortion to happen. So it's okay to have exceptions or to agree with something to an extent. We're not saying you have to go all in 100%. Video game censorship, ratings, maturity ratings, things like that, that's something that could kind of come in. So Devin could say, I'm going to do censorship, that could be fine. Zach could say he's going to do censorship, focus on movies or whatnot, that could be fine. You got two different arguments going in completely different ways.
Now, are we going to do other topics?
Sure, yeah, but that's just the first one that a lot of times people kind of think about. What are other things that get kind of brought up in the book? And it doesn't mean it's going to be a main point throughout, but it's something that is there. Conformity, okay.
Genetic order. Shenanigans.
Oops, I added an extra I in conformity. With conformity, whole idea that people are going to follow what they're quote unquote supposed to do, or at least just following someone else as opposed to doing what they believe would be best. You could have conformity coming in a bunch of different directions. Devin, any like specific types thinking of? Okay, so just like people in general within society. You could have conformity that some folks argue when it comes to education, there's too much conformity in schools. And again, just because you write about conformity in schools doesn't mean that it's in Fahrenheit 451, but the idea of conformity is, what happens at 11:14? All of you stand up and leave. Bells are going to ring at the same time. If you're not here at 7:20, you have to go down and get one of those little pink slips and get it filled out. Everyone has to take, in 9th, 10th, 11th grade, you're taking a math class, you're taking an English class, you're taking a science class, most of you are taking foreign language. So you could argue that there's too much conformity in education. You could do something that there's too much conformity just in society in general. Some folks take a look at it that maybe there is too much government influence when it comes to conformity. That there is a lack of free thinkers. You could take a look at trends. Why do people purchase certain kind of clothing or listen to certain type of music? I don't know who's winning the arm wrestling match, but it looks a little weird back there. Why do folks do that? You could take a look at like celebrity influence with it. So that could be a whole type of conformity that starts to come up, that there is too much influence from other places, whether it be government, whether it be celebrities, whatever the case may be. What do we know about the history of firefighters in Fahrenheit 451?
Ben Franklin started to burn.
Do you remember what year?
1749.
Not-
Burn British books.
Lack of free thinking.
What are you saying?
Yeah,
You're the ugliest.
89.
1790.
So,
So, one of the things that happens within Fahrenheit 451 is you have misinformed people. You have incorrect information. Some of this could kind of come back to censorship, not trying to make you do censorship by any means. You could have government lying to citizens. There's a term that we use quite a bit now, fake news.
fake news, CNN.
Alternative facts. You could be taking a look at bias in the media. Again, these would be things that someone could focus on specifically, where you could end up doing a whole essay about fake news, or you could be taking a look at how you have a misinformed public, take a look at possibly fake news, biases that are existing out there, and then the way people kind of like internalize that information that's coming their way. But the fact that it's introduced so far as like the firefighters in 1790, Ben Franklin trying to get rid of British influence, that being the history of the fire company. That is wrong, but people are misinformed. And you go back to what Devin was saying earlier, they are conforming, so there's not any kind of argument as to, hey, we should try to find out what the actual truth is. What's the problem of Millie's?
She wanna kill herself.
Okay,
He likes the TV.
so there's a couple different things you can look at. Number one, you could be dealing with drug, suicide issues. Now, for a persuasive essay, you wouldn't be doing something like, you were not taking an argument suicide is appropriate or suicide is inappropriate, but you could be taking an argument that more things need to be done for suicide prevention. You could be taking a look at how, and from that whole drug perspective, certainly there's a lot of things in the news about opioid crisis. Allegheny County, Washington County, Westmoreland County, those are three counties, three of the highest opioid usage counties in the state of Pennsylvania. So that would be an issue that you could take a look at. This could also lead to things with drug prevention. You'll have a lot of arguments, and again, not that this argument specifically shows up in Fahrenheit 451, but we're going back to the drug issue. You'll have arguments that drugs should be legalized. You'll have arguments that if you get arrested for distributing or use of a drug, you shouldn't go to prison, but should go to some kind of rehabilitation center. That's going to help you, not be dependent upon drugs, and also you have lessening the crowding that could be taking place in prisons, where it would be more violent criminals that should be there as opposed to a drug user. So there's certainly a variety of options that would be out there for you. The other thing someone said, she watches too much TV. There we go. You can take a look at technology dependency. Could be TV, certainly could be screen time for us, phones, computers, iPads. We could be taking a look at social media, where there's a dependency with social media to always know what's going on at all times. What happens to the city at the end of the book?
They get blown up.
By
They got by a bomb.
the assumption is what type?
Nuclear.
Nuclear. Adam was mentioning North Korea. I think when we said censorship, you could be taking a look at issues with nuclear weapons, whether countries should be able to have them, should there be a limit for them, for a lot of different, stay with me, for a lot of different arguments with it. You could certainly take a look at specific policies that should be done against a certain country, whether it be North Korea or something else, but nuclear weapons get mentioned within the course of the book. And not that we need to go into detail about every single little topic along the way, you also have things about parenting. You could take a look at, should there be qualifications for parenting? When Millie has her friends over, they're talking about family and kids being basically a nuisance. Schools are starting at a younger age, so that there can be a little bit more influence. Maybe we should take a look at what would be qualifications for having a child. You could make the argument that you need a license to drive, you need a license to fish, maybe you need a license in order to have a kid. Or you could argue, it's a right of all human beings. So if anyone wants to be a parent, they would have the ability to do it. You have stuff dealing with reckless driving. You have things with people being outside, so you could even kind of take a look at exercise issues and whatnot. You could take a look at anyone who would be considered an innovator or innovation, in the sense that Montauk tries to do something a little bit different, so he's kind of considered an outcast. You could take a look at how it's important to always have someone who's going to try to push the envelope a little bit and kind of be a trailblazer with it. So those topics would absolutely be out there. There's a ton of possibilities. No, you don't know right now probably what it is that you want to do, but there's probably a lot of current issues that we can certainly take a look at. Luke, what do you need?
I was asking what the word is after reckless.
Driving. And in some cases, you might end up kind of like, combining some, where technology dependency, some folks would argue, leads to reckless driving, cell phone usage, and all that kind of stuff that's going on. Any questions about topics? These are not all of them, but they're just kind of ideas that would be out there that you could look at.
You guys wanna see my picture? It's the game and do it myself.
All right. You're going to need a new sheet of paper because I'm going to show you the paragraph order that we're going to be going in. First paragraph's not going to come as any kind of surprise. You're going to have a general introduction, so we'll do overview. Certainly the main thing that you're going to have to include in here, this is going to be your thesis or your position on the issue. Remember, you're not informing us about an issue. You're taking a stance on what to do about something, or maybe a change that needs to occur, or whatever the case may be. Pardon? So the issue is going to have a connection to Fahrenheit 451. You probably won't mention Fahrenheit 451 in one of your introduction. You could, but it's not going to be a requirement that you would have to.
So you don't have to mention it at all.
It's going to be in the essay. I'll show you where, at least where. But if you were to introduce it in the introduction, that means that it has to be like a driving force of the whole entire essay. And it's going to be a source that you use. It will be a part of the essay, but it's not something that you're going to keep going back to time after time after time. It wouldn't shock me, Luke, if you use it in one paragraph,
Yeah.
and after that one paragraph, you're done.
Yeah.
Okay. Then you have 4 body paragraphs. Your first body paragraph, basically, you're going to identify the overall significance or relevance of the issue. Essentially, you're going to be answering the question, why is this important? So maybe you mentioned something about like conformity in your introduction to people, that there's too much conformity in the world in 2018 or in high school or in the United States or whatever. You introduce the idea. In this paragraph, this is when you start to explain, this is why it's an issue, this is why it's a problem, this is why something has to be done about it. You're not getting into your argument yet about it, about what you want to do, but you're at least letting us know this is an issue, here's why. Your next 2 paragraphs are going to be kind of similar, where for both numbers 3 and number 4, you're going to come up with subtopics. So you have subtopic number 1, subtopic number 2. In both these paragraphs, you're going to be supporting your overall position. So this is where you are going to be arguing your point. Luke, since you were talking about Fahrenheit 451, let's say you do something about dependency on technology.
Yeah.
So you could make reference in one of those that when TV, Bradbury mentions that folks could have the potential of watching too much TV. that it would cause them to be antisocial, less interaction with family, stuff like that. That doesn't mean the whole paragraph is going to be about Fahrenheit 451, but it means you incorporate it at least as a source. Now, you could write about something that Bradbury covers, but you and Bradbury might not agree on it. You might think that he is making a bigger issue out of something. Your position on technology could be that old people like Mr. Kane are making a bigger deal about how much time I spend with my computer or iPad or screen on phone or whatever, and it's really not going to be an issue. Mr. Snyder told me 42.
Mr. Snyder is not.
Mr. Snyder can catch his hands any day of the week.
So if that's if that happens for you, your fifth paragraph is going to be a counter argument. What that means is you are going to address and counter argue an opposing viewpoint. So you think that people are making too big of a deal about technology, it's the wave of the future, it's the way things are going to be. You know what? Adolescents, teenagers, young adults, everyone should have more access to technology because that's going to be part of their career. Bradbury makes too big of a deal out of this, and he exaggerates the negative effects that it's going to have. You could bring that up in this counter argument. What some folks will do, and they confuse themselves, and Trilby, you asked the question about, do I have to be like consistent with my argument the whole way throughout? Sometimes people will like totally change gears in the counter argument. I'm not asking you to take the opposing side. I'm asking you to figure out what would an opponent say about your argument, and now you explain why that person is wrong. So if I think that Logan would disagree with my main point about there's an opioid crisis, and that we should do something, I could do something where some proponents think that it's going to cost too much money to try to handle the issue, or that it's a non-solvable issue, but here is why they're incorrect. So I'm addressing a counter-argument, but I am explaining why they are incorrect in that viewpoint. So for your four-body paragraphs, you have one where you're basically identifying why it's an issue, then you got two paragraphs where you're going to be supporting your position, where you're certainly going to have a fair amount of note cards coming in, and then you're going to do a counter argument, and then we come to our normal last paragraph, number 6, is simply going to be a conclusion. So where Fahrenheit 451 is going to fit into the essay, it's entirely up to you, but George is not going to be writing about Fahrenheit 451 in 4 straight body paragraphs. At least I don't think that he's going to. I don't think anybody. The main sources that you're using are the stuff that you come up with. So that's why you want to make sure when it comes to topic selection, you pick something that's at least going to be of some interest to you, and that's what we're going to start kind of taking a look at tomorrow. What could be some potential issues, what could be some potential topics, going a little bit more depth and detail about them. You don't have any physical homework assignments for me, but I certainly want you to kind of start thinking about those things. So Thursday, like Friday, we got a pretty good idea of what topics to start investigating. But don't start worrying about filling out note cards or working on a research-based report. Still going to be some time. By that time, let's say like the library, maybe you get done with your note cards like after 3 or 4 days, then yes, we can get you going.
Did you guys have to?
But I would say that I don't think there's any reason for you to try to not skip steps, but work ahead so that you have the work done before we can start. I think you'll end up like rushing into stuff. I'm pretty sure that you will be starting to like draft. I gave you some. So maybe nice that we got it. So we got a sheet of what's going. Why we could have The here, let me